The red dust of Kepler 442b swirled in angry clouds as explosions lit up the morning sky. Commander Jake Morrison pressed his back against the concrete wall of the communications center and counted the remaining ammunition in his rifle. 12 rounds left. Around him, the last defenders of New Amarillo Colony fired desperately at the advancing alien forces. The Vorthak had come 3 weeks ago like a plague from space. Their massive ships had darkened the sky above the mining settlement, blocking out the pale sun that the colonists had learned to love. At first, the aliens had demanded surrender. When the humans refused, the killing began. Jake wiped sweat and blood from his forehead. His left arm hung useless at his side, broken by debris from the first bombing run. The colony that had been home to 8,000 people was now reduced to rubble and fire. Most of the buildings lay in ruins. The proud mining towers that had pulled precious metals from the planet's core were twisted metal sculptures reaching toward a hostile sky. "Commander, we need to move now," shouted Maria Santos over the sound of alien weapons. The transport pilot had been grounded when her ship took damage 2 days ago. Since then, she had fought alongside the colonists with a rifle in her hands instead of controls. Maria pointed toward the community center 3 blocks away. "The evacuation ships are loading the last civilians. If we don't get there soon, they'll have to leave without us." Jake nodded and signaled to the remaining defenders. Only 37 soldiers were left from the original garrison of 200. These men and women had families on those evacuation ships. They had fought and died to buy time for their loved ones to escape. The group moved through the ruined streets in short bursts. They would run from one piece of cover to the next while alien energy beams burned the air around them. The Vorthak soldiers were tall, gray-skinned creatures with 4 arms and faces like angry insects. They moved in perfect formation and showed no mercy to any human they found. Halfway to the community center, Jake saw something that made his blood freeze. A family of 5 was trapped in a collapsed building. The father was trying to dig his way to his injured wife, while their 3 children cried in terror. Vorthak soldiers were moving toward them from 2 directions. "We have to help them," Maria said, already raising her weapon. "We can't save everyone," Jake replied, but his voice carried no conviction. These were his people. He had sworn an oath to protect them all. The small group of defenders attacked the aliens from behind. The surprise gave them an advantage for exactly 15 seconds. Then more Vorthak appeared from the side streets and the real fighting began. Jake's rifle clicked empty. He drew his sidearm and kept firing. Around him, his soldiers fell one by one. Maria took a blast to her shoulder that spun her around, but she kept fighting. The family they were trying to save huddled in the debris while bullets and energy beams flew overhead. When the smoke cleared, only Jake, Maria, and 6 others were still alive. The family was safe, but the cost had been terrible. Jake looked at the bodies of his soldiers and felt something break inside his chest. Good people. All of them good people who would never see Earth again. "Sir, the evacuation ships are taking off," reported Sergeant Mike Chen over the radio. His voice was thick with static and fear. "The aliens broke through the perimeter. We can't hold them much longer." Jake could see the ships rising into the red sky, 3 transport vessels carrying the last survivors of New Amarillo. His heart lifted for a moment, knowing that thousands of colonists would live to see another day. Then alien fighters appeared and began their attack. The first transport ship exploded in a ball of fire. Jake watched helplessly as burning debris fell back to the planet's surface. The second ship made it higher before missiles tore through its hull. It spun out of control and crashed into the mountains beyond the colony. The third transport, piloted by Maria's friend Danny Rodriguez, tried to run low and fast. It almost worked. The ship cleared the colony and was heading for open sky when a Vorthak destroyer emerged from the clouds. One blast from its main cannon, and the last hope of New Amarillo fell burning to the earth 2 miles from the settlement. Maria screamed and ran toward the crash site. Jake and the others followed, fighting through alien patrols that seemed to be everywhere. When they reached the wreckage, the ship was already consumed by flames. Most of the passengers were dead, but some had been thrown clear during the crash. Jake found Danny Rodriguez first. The pilot was barely breathing, his chest crushed by twisted metal. "The baby," Danny whispered, blood running from the corner of his mouth. "Find the baby." They searched through the wreckage and survivors. 18 people had lived through the crash, all of them badly injured. Among them was a young woman named Ellen Chen, Sergeant Mike's wife. She was unconscious and bleeding from a head wound, but she was breathing. "Where's the baby?" Maria asked her when she woke up. "Danny said there was a baby." Ellen's eyes filled with tears. "Tommy, my baby Tommy, he was in his carrier seat. I put him in the carrier seat." They found the infant 20 yards from the main wreckage. 6-month-old Tommy Chen had somehow survived the crash with only minor cuts and bruises. His carrier seat had protected him, but now he was crying with the desperate sound that only a hungry, scared baby can make. Ellen tried to reach for her son, but her injuries were too severe. She died holding Jake's hand, her last words a whispered plea to take care of Tommy. The Vorthak found them an hour later. Jake and his remaining people were too tired and wounded to fight anymore. The aliens rounded up the 18 survivors and marched them toward their slave ships. They showed no interest in the crying baby left behind in the ruins. As the prisoners disappeared into the alien vessel, baby Tommy's cries echoed across the empty colony. The sound carried on the wind through streets where 8,000 people had once lived and worked and dreamed of home. Now there was only silence, dust, and the tears of one small child who would soon learn what it meant to be alone in a hostile universe. The Vorthak ships lifted off, taking their human cargo to places unknown. Behind them, the ruins of New Amarillo smoldered in the alien twilight, and somewhere in the wreckage a baby cried for parents who would never answer, in a place where no help would ever come, or so it seemed. The UEF battlecruiser Comanche dropped out of hyperspace 3 days after New Amarillo fell silent. Captain Robert Standing Bear stood on the bridge and stared at the red planet through the main view screen. No lights flickered on the surface where the mining colony should have been busy with daily life. "Sir, I'm not picking up any communication signals from the planet," reported Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh from her station. Her fingers moved quickly over the communication controls, searching for any sign that someone was still alive down there. Standing Bear was a tall man with dark skin and black hair that he kept tied back in a traditional style. His ancestors had been warriors of the great Comanche nation on old Earth. That warrior blood still ran strong in his veins, even here among the stars. "What about the distress beacon?" he asked. "It went dead 2 days ago, Captain. Whatever happened down there, it happened fast." Standing Bear felt a cold anger growing in his chest. New Amarillo had been home to good people. Miners and their families who had left Earth to build something better on this distant world. They had asked for protection, and the United Earth Federation had failed them. "Take us into orbit," he ordered. "Full sensor sweep of the colony site. I want to know what we're dealing with." The Comanche was one of the newest ships in the Earth fleet. She carried a crew of 450, all volunteers who had signed up to protect human colonies on the frontier. Standing Bear had commanded her for 3 years, and in that time they had never lost a single civilian under their protection. Today felt different. "Captain, I'm reading massive destruction at the colony site," called out Ensign Danny White Eagle from the sensor station. He was young, barely 22, but one of the best sensor operators in the fleet. "Most of the buildings are destroyed. I'm seeing burn patterns consistent with Vorthak energy weapons." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew about the Vorthak Empire. They were slavers who traveled from system to system, taking what they wanted and killing the rest. Most alien species feared them too much to fight back. "Any survivors?" Standing Bear asked. "Sir, I'm not detecting any human life signs in the main colony area." "But wait," Danny worked the controls more carefully. "There might be something. The readings are very weak, but there's a small biological signature near the crash site of what looks like a transport ship." Standing Bear turned to his first officer, Commander Lisa Blackwood. She was a tough woman with red hair and green eyes who had served with him since they were both junior officers. More importantly, she was a trained medic who had saved more lives than anyone else on the ship. "Lisa, take a team down to investigate. If there are survivors, I want them found and brought up immediately." "Yes, sir," Blackwood replied. She was already moving toward the door. "I'll take Sergeant Ironhorse and a full medical team." "And Lisa," Standing Bear called after her. "Be careful down there. The Vorthak might have left some surprises behind." 20 minutes later, Blackwood's shuttle touched down near the wreckage of the transport ship. The red dust swirled around them as they stepped out onto the planet's surface. Sergeant Tom Ironhorse and his Marines spread out in a defensive pattern, while Blackwood activated her medical scanner. "The readings are coming from over there," she said, pointing toward a piece of twisted metal that had once been part of the ship's passenger section. They moved carefully through the debris. Ironhorse kept his rifle ready while the medical team followed with their equipment. The colony in the distance looked like a graveyard. Smoke still rose from some of the buildings 3 days after the attack. "Commander, over here," called out Corporal Mike Rodriguez. He was kneeling next to what looked like an infant carrier that had been thrown clear of the crash. Blackwood ran over and heard it immediately. The sound was weak but unmistakable. A baby crying. "Oh my God," she whispered, kneeling down next to the carrier. Inside was a tiny baby boy, maybe 6 months old. He was dirty and dehydrated but alive. His little fists waved in the air as he cried, and his dark eyes looked up at Blackwood with the trust that only babies can show. "How is he still alive?" Rodriguez asked in amazement. Blackwood was already running her medical scanner over the infant. "He's dehydrated and hungry but otherwise healthy. This carrier must have protected him during the crash. And look at this." She pointed to a small device attached to the carrier. It was a personal environmental unit, designed to keep babies warm and provide basic life support in emergencies. The power indicator showed it had been running for exactly 3 days. Someone made sure he would survive, Blackwood said softly. She lifted the baby out of the carrier and held him against her chest. His crying stopped immediately, and he looked up at her with wide, curious eyes. Iron Horse was examining something else he had found near the carrier. "Commander, there's an ID tag here. Says his name is Thomas Chen. Parents listed as Ellen and Michael Chen." "Any sign of the parents?" Blackwood asked. "No, ma'am, but there are graves over there. Looks like someone buried the crash victims before." His voice trailed off. "Before they were taken away by the aliens." Blackwood felt something fierce and protective rise up inside her chest as she looked down at baby Tommy. This child had lost everything. His parents, his home, his entire world. But he was still fighting to live. "Iron Horse, contact the ship. Tell the captain we found a survivor." "Just one, Commander?" She looked around at the empty ruins of New Amarillo. Somewhere out in space, the Vorthak were probably selling human beings like cattle. But they had made one mistake. They had left this baby behind thinking he was worthless. "Just one," she confirmed. "But he's ours now." On the bridge of the Comanche, Standing Bear received the report with mixed emotions. He was glad they had found a survivor, but his heart ached for all the people they had lost. When Blackwood returned with baby Tommy, the entire crew gathered to see the child who had survived impossible odds. "What happens to him now?" asked Lieutenant Walsh. Standing Bear took the baby in his arms and felt something he had not expected. The child looked up at him without fear, as if he somehow knew he was safe now. In that moment, the captain made a decision that would change everything. "He becomes one of us," Standing Bear said in a voice that carried to every corner of the bridge. "The Comanche tribe never abandons family, and this child is family now." The crew murmured their agreement. They had come too late to save New Amarillo, but they would make sure baby Tommy Chen never cried alone again. Standing Bear looked out at the stars and made a silent promise. Somewhere out there, the Vorthak thought they had won. They thought humans were weak and easy to defeat. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The hunt was about to begin. Captain Standing Bear stood in the war room of the Comanche, studying the star charts spread across the holographic display. It had been 1 week since they found baby Tommy in the ruins of New Amarillo. 1 week of searching for any trace of the Vorthak fleet that had destroyed the colony. Tommy was sleeping peacefully in Commander Blackwood's arms as she sat at the conference table. The baby had grown stronger each day under the crew's care. Every Marine on the ship had taken turns holding him, feeding him, and singing old Earth lullabies to help him sleep. The tough soldiers who fought alien pirates and smugglers had become gentle nursemaids to one small child. "Sir, we've analyzed the debris field around the planet," reported Ensign White Eagle. "The Vorthak fleet was definitely here. Based on the ion trails, they had at least 6 ships. 3 destroyers, 2 cruisers, and 1 heavy transport." "A transport," Standing Bear said, his jaw tightening. "That's a slave ship." Lieutenant Walsh looked up from her communication console. "Captain, I've been monitoring Vorthak communication frequencies. I picked up something interesting 3 hours ago." She played a recording of alien voices speaking in their harsh language. The ship's computer translated the words into English text that appeared on the main screen. "Cargo transfer complete at Tartarus Prime. Human specimens showing acceptable survival rates. Beginning processing for sale to highest bidders." The room went silent except for the soft breathing of baby Tommy. Every person at the table understood what those cold words meant. The people of New Amarillo were alive, but they were being sold like animals at an alien slave market. "Where is Tartarus Prime?" Standing Bear asked. White Eagle worked his controls and brought up a new star chart. "It's a moon orbiting the gas giant Kronos, about 4 days' travel from here. According to our intelligence files, it's a Vorthak processing facility. They take slaves there before shipping them to buyers across the galaxy." "How well defended is it?" "Very well, sir. The moon has defensive satellites, shield generators, and at least one Vorthak battle station in orbit. Our intelligence estimates show they keep a garrison of 50,000 troops on the surface." Standing Bear walked over to the window and looked out at the stars. The Comanche was a powerful ship, but she was only one vessel against an entire Vorthak military installation. Any conventional attack would be suicide for his crew, but conventional attacks were not the Comanche way. "How long do we have before they ship the prisoners off-world?" he asked. "Based on previous Vorthak operations, maybe 2 weeks," Walsh replied. "After that, the slaves get scattered across dozens of star systems. We'd never find them all." Standing Bear turned back to his officers. These were good people who had sworn an oath to protect human colonies. They had failed once when New Amarillo fell. He would not let them fail again. "Sergeant Ironhorse, I want you to review everything we know about Vorthak military tactics. Find their weaknesses." "Yes, sir." "Rodriguez, start working on modifications to our weapon systems. I want maximum firepower and minimum energy signature." "Understood, Captain." "Walsh, keep monitoring their communications. I want to know every ship movement, every patrol schedule, every time a Vorthak officer sneezes." "Already on it." "Sir?" Standing Bear looked down at baby Tommy, who had woken up and was watching the adults with curious eyes. The child reached out with one tiny hand toward the star charts, as if he understood that somewhere among those lights, his family's killers were waiting. "We're going to get them back, little warrior," Standing Bear whispered to the baby. "I promise you that." Over the next 3 days, the crew of the Comanche worked with desperate energy. Rodriguez and his engineering team stripped power from non-essential systems to boost the ship's weapons. They installed additional armor plating and modified the engines for maximum speed and stealth. Ironhorse studied every battle the humans had ever fought against the Vorthak. He learned their formations, their response times, and their standard procedures. More importantly, he learned their arrogance. The Vorthak had never been successfully attacked by humans. They thought Earth's people were too weak and stupid to be a real threat. That arrogance would be their downfall. Walsh intercepted dozens of Vorthak transmissions. She learned the guard rotation schedules at Tartarus Prime, the locations of the defensive weapons, and the layout of the slave-holding facilities. She also discovered something else that made Standing Bear's blood burn with anger. "Captain, they're not just processing the new Amarillo colonists," she reported. "There are humans from at least 6 other colonies on that moon. The Vorthak have been raiding human settlements for months. How many total prisoners?" "At least 3,000, sir. Maybe more." Standing Bear felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. 3,000 human beings were counting on him to save them, even though they did not know he was coming. On the 4th day, Tommy took his first steps. Blackwood was sitting on the floor of her quarters, holding her hands out to the baby. Tommy had been pulling himself up on furniture for days, and she could tell he was ready to walk. When he finally let go of the chair and took 3 wobbly steps into her arms, half the crew was watching through the open door. The tough Marines cheered like their favorite sports team had just won a championship. Tommy clapped his hands and laughed, not understanding why all the big people were so excited. "Did you see that, Captain?" Rodriguez called out. "The little guy's walking." Standing Bear smiled, but his eyes remained focused on the mission ahead. Tommy was walking now, taking his first steps toward whatever future awaited him. The captain would make sure that future included his family from New Amarillo. "Set course for the Kronos system," he ordered. "Maximum stealth approach. It's time to teach the Vorthak what happens when they mess with human children." The Comanche turned toward distant stars, carrying 450 warriors and one small boy toward the most dangerous mission of their lives. Behind them, the ruins of New Amarillo grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared into the cosmic dark. The hunt had begun. The Comanche drifted silently through the asteroid field that surrounded Tartarus Prime. Captain Standing Bear had ordered all non-essential systems shut down to avoid detection by Vorthak sensors. The ship moved like a ghost among the floating rocks, using their cover to get close to the heavily defended moon. "Sir?" I'm counting 12 defensive satellites around the moon, whispered Ensign White. Eagle. Plus 2 Vorthak destroyers on patrol, and 1 battle station in high orbit. Standing Bear studied the tactical display with the cold patience his ancestors had shown when hunting buffalo on the Great Plains. This was not a battle that could be won with brute force. It required cunning, timing, and the willingness to take risks that no sane military commander would consider. Rodriguez, are the modifications ready? He asked. Yes, sir. We've rigged explosive charges on 6 of the larger asteroids. When we detonate them, the debris will create a sensor shadow that should hide our approach for about 10 minutes. 10 minutes to get in, rescue 3,000 prisoners and get out, said Commander Blackwood. She was holding baby Tommy, who was chewing happily on a toy soldier that Sergeant Ironhorse had carved for him. That's cutting it pretty close. The Comanche way has always been to strike fast and disappear before the enemy knows what hit them, Standing Bear replied. Ironhorse, what's the status of the assault teams? Ready to go, sir. We've got 4 squads prepped for infiltration. White Eagle will pilot the stealth shuttles while Rodriguez's team takes out the sensor grid from inside. Standing Bear looked at his officers and felt a fierce pride in their courage. Every person on this ship was volunteering for a mission that would probably get them all killed. They were doing it for people they had never met and for one small baby who would never remember their sacrifice. Walsh, any update on prisoner locations? The slave processing facility is built into the moon's North Polar region. The humans are being held in 3 separate compounds about 2 miles apart from each other. Security is heavy, but most of the guards are focused on keeping prisoners in, not keeping rescuers out, because they don't expect anyone to be crazy enough to attack this place, Standing Bear said with a grim smile. Tommy gurgled and reached toward the tactical display, his tiny fingers trying to grasp the holographic images of spaceships. Blackwood gently pulled his hand back and whispered soothing words in his ear. All right, people. This is it, Standing Bear announced. We go in hard and fast. Primary objective is prisoner extraction. Secondary objective is destroying their slave processing equipment, so they can't do this to anyone else. Tertiary objective is getting home alive to tell the story. What about the baby during the assault? Asked Ironhorse. Standing Bear looked at Tommy, who was now trying to grab Lieutenant Walsh's communication headset. The child had become the heart of this mission, but he would also be a liability in combat. He stays on the ship with a skeleton crew. If we don't make it back, they're to head for Earth and make sure Tommy gets to a good family. Sir, with respect, I volunteer to stay behind and watch him, said Walsh. We need you on communications for the assault. Actually, sir, I've been training Rodriguez on the communication systems. He can handle battlefield coordination while I keep Tommy safe. Standing Bear considered this for a moment. Walsh had grown especially attached to the baby over the past week. She sang him songs from her grandmother's homeland and had even started teaching him simple words in English. Very well. Walsh and Tommy stay aboard with Engineering Team 3. Everyone else? Prepare for operation. 2 hours later, the assault began. Rodriguez detonated the asteroid charges in a carefully timed sequence. The explosion sent clouds of rock debris spinning toward Tartarus Prime, creating exactly the sensor shadow he had predicted. The Comanche slipped through the chaos like a shark moving through murky water. 4 stealth shuttles launched from the ship's belly and raced toward different targets on the moon's surface. Each shuttle carried a squad of Marines armed with the best weapons humanity could provide. They had trained for this mission until every movement was automatic, every contingency planned for. The first shuttle, piloted by White Eagle, landed near the main sensor array. Ironhorse and his team moved through the facility like deadly shadows, placing explosive charges on critical systems. The Vorthak guards never knew what hit them. The second and third shuttles hit the slave compound simultaneously. The aliens had built their prisons to keep humans in, but they had not counted on humans breaking in. Marine demolition charges blew holes in the compound walls while rescue teams poured inside. Jake Morrison was in the first compound. The former commander of New Amarillo's defense force had survived 3 weeks of alien captivity, but he looked like he had aged 10 years. When the Marines burst through the wall, he thought he was hallucinating. "Earth forces," shouted Corporal Davis. "We're here to get you out. Can you walk?" Jake stood up on shaking legs and felt hope flood through his body for the first time since the colony fell. "There are 847 of us in here. Men, women, and children. Some are injured, but most can move. Then let's move them. We've got maybe 6 minutes before every Vorthak on this moon comes looking for us. The evacuation proceeded with military precision despite the chaos. Human prisoners who had given up hope suddenly found themselves running toward rescue shuttles, while Earth Marines provided covering fire. Children who had cried for their parents every night were lifted up by gentle soldiers and carried to safety. In the second compound, Maria Santos helped evacuate the survivors from her crashed transport. She had been beaten by her captors, but her spirit remained unbroken. When she saw the Earth Marines, she grabbed a fallen alien weapon and joined the fight. The third compound held prisoners from other colonies that had been attacked in recent months. These humans had been enslaved longer and were in worse condition, but they still found the strength to run when freedom called their names. Meanwhile, Rodriguez's team was systematically destroying the moon's infrastructure. Power plants exploded in brilliant flashes. Communication arrays crumpled under precisely placed charges. The slave processing equipment that had tormented thousands of innocent people melted under plasma fire. Standing Bear coordinated the entire operation from the Comanche's bridge while baby Tommy slept peacefully in Walsh's arms, unaware that the fate of his people hung in the balance. "Sir, we've got trouble," reported White Eagle over the radio. "Vorthak reinforcements are incoming from the orbital battle station. 2 destroyers and about 50 fighter craft. How long until they reach the moon?" 4 minutes, sir." Standing Bear felt ice form in his stomach. His people were still loading prisoners onto the shuttles. They needed at least 6 more minutes to complete the evacuation. "All teams, this is Comanche Actual. We're about to have company. Speed up the extraction by any means necessary." On the moon's surface, the Marines pushed themselves beyond human limits. They carried injured prisoners who could not walk. They gave their own emergency oxygen to children who were having trouble breathing. They turned a desperate evacuation into a miracle of human courage and determination. 3 minutes and 47 seconds later, the last prisoner was loaded onto a shuttle. The stealth craft launched from the moon just as Vorthak fighters began their attack runs. Energy beams lit up the sky, but the Earth shuttles disappeared into the asteroid field before the aliens could target them effectively. Standing Bear watched the shuttles dock with his ship and felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had done the impossible. 3,000 human beings who had been given up for dead were now safe aboard the Comanche. But the mission was not over yet. The Vorthak battle fleet was closing in, and the Comanche was still outnumbered 20-1. "All right, people," Standing Bear announced to his crew. "Now we show these aliens why they should never mess with human families. Take us home." 3 weeks after the rescue at Tartarus Prime, the UEF Memorial Station orbited peacefully around Earth's moon. The massive structure served as a gathering place for ceremonies honoring those who had given their lives protecting humanity among the stars. Today, it hosted the largest memorial service in Earth's history. Captain Standing Bear stood at the podium in the main hall, looking out at nearly 10,000 people who had come to honor the victims of New Amarillo. The rescued colonists sat in the front rows, still bearing the marks of their captivity but alive and free. Behind them were families of other colonists who had been killed in Vorthak raids across human space. In his arms, Standing Bear held baby Tommy Chen, now 8 months old and growing stronger every day. The child had become a symbol of hope for everyone who had suffered at alien hands. His bright eyes looked out at the crowd without fear, as if he understood that all these people had gathered to remember his parents. Commander Blackwood sat in the front row wearing her dress uniform. She had been decorated for her role in the rescue mission, but the medal meant less to her than the smile Tommy gave her every morning when she helped feed him breakfast. Sergeant Ironhorse sat beside her, along with the other Marines who had risked everything to save their fellow humans. "We gather today not just to mourn the dead, but to celebrate the living," Standing Bear began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. 3,000 human beings are here today because good people chose to do what was right instead of what was safe." He paused and looked down at Tommy, who was reaching toward the memorial wall where the names of the New Amarillo victims were displayed in letters of gold. Ellen Chen and Michael Chen were listed among the 837 colonists who had died in the attack. This child lost his parents in the massacre at New Amarillo. He was found alone in the wreckage, crying for help that we thought would never come. But he did not cry alone for long. Standing Bear's voice grew stronger as he continued. The men and women of the UEF battlecruiser Comanche heard his cries across the void of space. They came for him, and for all of you who had been taken by those who thought human life was worthless. The hall was completely silent except for the soft sounds of people weeping. Jake Morrison sat with his wife Sarah, whom he had thought he would never see again. Maria Santos held her daughter Anna, a 5-year-old who had been separated from her mother during the attack, but reunited during the rescue. The Vorthak Empire thought they understood humanity, Standing Bear said. They saw our colonies as easy targets. They saw our people as weak creatures who could be enslaved without consequence. They were wrong. Tommy gurgled and clapped his small hands together, drawing gentle laughter from the crowd. The sound broke some of the sadness in the room and reminded everyone why they were fighting. We did not rescue these people because it was strategically important. We did not attack Tartarus Prime because our government ordered us to do so. We went because that is what families do for each other, and humanity is one family, whether we were born on Earth or on distant worlds among the stars. Standing Bear walked over to the memorial wall and placed his hand on the names of Tommy's parents. Ellen and Michael Chen died protecting their son. They made sure he would survive even when they could not. Their sacrifice and the sacrifice of everyone whose name is on this wall will not be forgotten. He turned back to the crowd, still holding Tommy in his arms. But this ceremony is not just about remembering the past. It is about making a promise for the future. The baby reached up and touched Standing Bear's face with one tiny hand. The gesture was so innocent and trusting that many people in the audience started crying again. I promise that no human child will ever cry alone again while monsters roam the galaxy. I promise that humanity will stand together against any enemy who threatens our families. And I promise that the next time someone attacks innocent people, they will face not just one ship, but the entire strength of the human spirit. The crowd rose to their feet in thunderous applause. Tommy looked around at all the standing people and laughed with delight, as if the sound was music made just for him. After the ceremony, there was a reception where the rescued colonists could reunite with family members who had thought them dead. Tommy was passed from person to person, each survivor wanting to hold the baby who had become a symbol of their shared survival. Jake Morrison approached Standing Bear with a request that had been building in his mind for weeks. "Captain, I want to ask you something." "What's on your mind, Jake?" "The colonists have been talking. We don't want to go back to mining worlds or farming settlements. We want to make sure this never happens to anyone else." Standing Bear raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" "We want to join the UEF military. All of us who are able. We've seen what the aliens can do and we've seen what humans can do when we fight back. We want to be part of that fight." The captain looked around the room at the former colonists. These were people who had lost everything but found the courage to start over. They had stared death in the face and chosen to live. The military could use soldiers with that kind of determination. "I'll put in a good word with command," Standing Bear promised. "The fleet needs people who understand what we're fighting for." Later that evening, Standing Bear stood in his quarters aboard the Comanche, which was docked at the memorial station. Tommy was sleeping in a crib that Rodriguez had built specially for him. The baby had grown so much since they found him in the ruins. He was sitting up on his own now, babbling in what might have been his first attempts at words. Commander Blackwood knocked on the door and entered quietly. "How's he doing?" "Good. The doctors say he's developing normally despite everything he's been through." "Kids are tougher than we think." Blackwood sat down next to the crib and watched Tommy sleep. "What happens to him now?" "The UEF will want to place him with a family on Earth." Standing Bear had been thinking about that question for weeks. Tommy had become part of the Comanche crew in ways that went beyond military regulations. The baby knew their voices, their faces, their routines. He was happy and healthy, surrounded by people who loved him. "The crew has talked about it," Standing Bear said. "We want to adopt him officially, all of us. Make him a ward of the ship. Is that even legal?" "I've been researching it. There's precedent for military units adopting war orphans. It would require approval from UEF command, but I think they'll agree." Blackwood smiled and reached down to gently touch Tommy's hand. The baby stirred slightly but did not wake up. "Tommy Chen, Standing Bear," she said softly. "I like the sound of that." Standing Bear looked out the window at Earth hanging in the starry void. Somewhere out there, the Vorthak Empire was probably planning their next move. Other alien powers were watching to see how humanity would respond to future threats. The galaxy was full of dangers that could not be stopped by one ship or one crew. But they had proven something important at Tartarus Prime. They had shown that humans would cross any distance and face any odds to protect their own. Word of the rescue was already spreading through space, carried by traders and diplomats to every corner of known civilization. Tommy Chen had cried alone for 3 days in the ruins of his world. He would never cry alone again, and neither would any other human child, as long as people like the crew of the Comanche were willing to fight for what was right. The promise had been made, and it would be kept. 5 years had passed since the rescue at Tartarus Prime, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Tommy Chen Standing Bear was now a bright 5-year-old boy who ran through the corridors of the Comanche like he owned the ship. In many ways he did. Every member of the crew had helped raise him, and he knew exactly which adults would give him extra cookies and which ones would make him finish his lessons. Captain Standing Bear sat in the diplomatic conference room on the neutral space station New Geneva, watching his adopted son play with toy spaceships on the floor. Across the table sat Ambassador Krex of the Vorthak Empire, a tall gray alien whose forearms gestured nervously as he spoke. "The Empire wishes to discuss terms for a permanent ceasefire," Krex said in heavily accented English. "The recent conflicts have been costly for both our peoples." Standing Bear almost smiled at the alien's careful choice of words. Costly was one way to describe what had happened to the Vorthak over the past 5 years. After the story of Tommy's rescue spread through human space, recruitment for the UEF military had increased by 300%. Every human colony that had ever feared alien attack now had volunteers ready to fight. More importantly, other alien species had taken notice. The Vorthak Empire had built their power on the fear of weaker races who thought resistance was hopeless. When humans proved that the Empire could be beaten, that fear began to crumble. "What terms did you have in mind?" Standing Bear asked. Tommy looked up from his toys and studied the alien ambassador with curious eyes. He had grown up around different species at the diplomatic station, and was not afraid of beings who looked different from humans. But he had been taught to be wary of Vorthak specifically. "Complete withdrawal of Imperial forces from human space," Krex continued. "Recognition of human territorial claims. Return of all human prisoners currently held in Imperial custody. And in exchange, humanity agrees to cease military operations against Imperial targets." Standing Bear leaned back in his chair and considered the offer. It was more than anyone had expected to get from the Vorthak 5 years ago. The empire that had once seemed unstoppable was now asking for peace with a species they had dismissed as primitive. "I'll need to discuss this with UEF Command," he said, "but I think we can reach an agreement." Tommy had abandoned his toys and climbed up onto Standing Bear's lap. The boy whispered something in his adoptive father's ear that made the captain chuckle. "What did the child say?" asked Ambassador Krex. "He wanted to know if you were one of the bad aliens who hurt his first mommy and daddy." Krex's insect-like face showed what might have been embarrassment. "I was not personally involved in the attack on New Amarillo, but yes, I represent the government that ordered it." Tommy studied the alien for a long moment, then said in his clear 5-year-old voice, "You should say sorry, Tommy," Standing Bear said gently. "Ambassador Krex is here to talk about stopping the fighting. But he should still say sorry for hurting people." The room fell silent. Krex looked down at the small human child who had caused so much trouble for his empire. This boy's rescue had inspired a military campaign that cost the Vorthak dozens of ships and thousands of soldiers. More importantly, it had inspired other species to rebel against imperial rule. "You are correct, young one," Krex said finally. "I am sorry for the pain my people caused yours." Tommy nodded seriously as if this was exactly what he had expected to hear. Then he went back to playing with his spaceships. After the meeting, Standing Bear took Tommy to the station's observation deck, where they could look out at the stars. The boy loved to watch ships coming and going from the busy spaceport. Today, they could see the UEF carrier Enterprise docked nearby, along with vessels from a dozen different alien civilizations. "Daddy Robert, why did the bad aliens attack New Amarillo?" Tommy asked. It was not the first time he had asked this question, and it would not be the last. Standing Bear lifted the boy up so he could see better through the transparent aluminum windows. "Some people think they can take whatever they want from others who seem weaker. They don't understand that everyone has the right to live free. But we showed them they were wrong. We showed them that humans take care of each other. When someone hurts one of us, all of us come to help." Tommy pointed at a sleek ship undocking from the station. Is that a human ship? No, that's a Altarian cruiser. The Altarians used to be afraid of the Vorthak. But after they heard about what we did at Tartarus Prime, they decided to fight back too. Did they win? They're still fighting, but yes, they're winning. And so are the Centaurans and the Rigelians and lots of other people who decided they didn't want to be scared anymore. Tommy thought about this for a moment. So saving me helped save other people too? Standing Bear hugged his son tighter. Saving you reminded everyone that every life matters. When we refuse to abandon even one person, it shows that we'll never abandon anyone. They stood together watching the stars until Tommy fell asleep in his father's arms. Standing Bear carried the boy back to their quarters on the Comanche, which was permanently docked at New Geneva now. The ship had become a symbol of human determination, and diplomats from across the galaxy came to visit the vessel that had changed the balance of power in their region of space. Commander Blackwood met them at the airlock. She was wearing civilian clothes now, having retired from military service to become Tommy's full-time guardian and teacher. The boy needed stability and education, and she had volunteered to provide both. How did the negotiations go? She asked quietly. Better than expected. I think we'll have a peace treaty within the month. Good. Maybe now we can focus on building instead of fighting. Standing Bear nodded and carried Tommy to his bedroom. The boy's room was filled with gifts from grateful colonists, models of spaceships, and pictures drawn by children from across human space. Tommy had become a celebrity without understanding what that meant. To him, the constant stream of visitors was just part of normal life. As Standing Bear tucked his son into bed, Tommy mumbled sleepily, "Daddy, will you tell me the story?" "Which story?" "About the brave ship that came to save everyone." Standing Bear sat down on the edge of the bed and began the tale that Tommy never tired of hearing. Once upon a time, there was a little boy who cried alone on a broken world. But far away among the stars, a ship called the Comanche heard his cries and came to help him. "And they found me in the wreckage," Tommy added, his eyes already closing. "They found you in the wreckage, and they decided that you would never be alone again. Then they went to fight the monsters who had hurt your family. And they won. They won, and everyone lived happily ever after." Tommy smiled and fell asleep clutching a small stuffed animal that looked like a Comanche warrior. Standing Bear kissed his forehead and quietly left the room. In the corridor outside, he found a dozen crew members waiting to hear about the peace negotiations. These men and women had become Tommy's extended family over the years. They had watched him take his first steps, heard his first words, and celebrated every milestone in his young life. "So what's the word, Captain?" asked Sergeant Ironhorse. "Are we finally going to have peace?" "Looks that way. The Vorthak want to end the fighting." "Good," said Rodriguez. "Maybe now Tommy can grow up in a galaxy where humans don't have to fight for the right to exist." Standing Bear looked back toward his son's room and felt a deep satisfaction settle in his chest. 5 years ago, they had found a crying baby in the ruins of a destroyed colony. Today, that child was sleeping safely while former enemies negotiated for peace. The rescue at Tartarus Prime had cost the lives of good people and changed the course of galactic history. But most importantly, it had saved one small boy who would grow up knowing that he was loved and protected by the finest family in the universe. Tommy Chen Standing Bear would never remember his birth parents or the tragedy that brought him to the Comanche, but he would always know that when he cried alone in the darkness, brave people heard him and came running to help. And in a galaxy full of dangers and wonders, that knowledge would be enough to make him strong.